Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Transcendence. I'm your host, DJ Smiley Mike. With me in the studio this week,
DJ Lace, hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And I'm just going to adjust so that I can actually see you
These things are amazing.
while we're chatting.
Oh, wow, right on. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, are you kidding? Thank you for coming.
Oh, no problem.
I've been... before we started, you were saying that I've been doing the show for a while, and indeed I have. The show's been on the air for, 15 plus years, more than that now. And I've had a number of people on the show at different times and talking, and I've never prepared like an interview at all. But when you were coming in, I'm like, I got to write some stuff down. I got to make some notes. I got to figure out, because there are so many questions that I want to ask.
Oh, no.
Because I followed you for so long. Well, I brought a treat that maybe you recognize and maybe you won't, but I'll play it for you in a bit.
All right.
But I've known you, DJ Lace, as the name for decades.
Yes.
And so, I know we're here and we're going to talk about Sequential Circus 22, which is coming up at Open Studios, all live PA, live performance, electronic acts, which makes it very unique, very cool, very, very diverse. But your history goes back like my early days in the rave scene. I'm pretty sure I have memories of Mars, all kinds of stuff. And you DJ, you've also produced, there's so much going on.
I just can't stop. Music is my life. So it's I'm sure you understand how that is. Once you get into music, it just takes over your life and it just keeps going and going and going and going.
So where did that start for you?
Music?
Yeah.
Oh my. It started in the early 80s. Well, I come from an artist family. So I think I was always surrounded by music and art and painting and video and all sorts and photography and all sorts of different things. So it was just a question of choosing something that I was interested in, and I chose music because nobody else in my family was doing that.
When you started in music, did you start right off in electronic music, or did you start in something else?
I started immediately in electronic music. It was the most exciting things that I had ever heard at the time, because electronic music when I started was new. It wasn't new. I mean, it's been around since the 50s, 60s, 70s if you want. But when I heard music for the first time, I heard things like Jean-Michel Jarre, in the late 70s when I was growing up. And to me, that was so different and extraordinary than anything else I was listening to, that right away I fell in love with it. And I was like, what are these weird sounds and things? I want to do something like that. And right away, I tried to figure out what it was and just got started. A couple tape decks and a TR-808, and that's how I got started in music.
And with that start, was it on the production side, or was it on like blending, DJ mixing? What were you trying to do when you first started?
I was trying, excuse me, I think that when I started making music, I was trying to reproduce what I heard. I had heard like I said, the Jarre stuff was really instrumental for me in kind of giving me an idea. I heard Jarre, and then I heard Kraftwerk right away, and I'd always liked dance music already as a child. It's just something I really liked, and I was really into something we had in France, which are called sound to light shows. So every time there would be like a festival in my city, they would have these big sound to light shows. And a lot of times they would have playback music that was sort of weird and electronic, and they would light up the buildings and the arenas where I grew up. There were these large arenas. So that kind of just got me going, and I started to try to reproduce that. I had 2 monophonic tape decks, an 808, and then I bought my first synthesizer, which was like a Korg Delta. Really strange little synth, and I would actually just try and play some of the stuff that I had heard. I didn't really, I had to learn music as I had this equipment. I was learning music at the same time, and I was really, I think we all start that way. We start by reproducing something that really influences us, and for me it was Jarre and Kraftwerk. Those 2 things I heard it was like space music, and I heard my first Jarre record when I went to see Star Wars. So those two things, that was, that really changed my life forever. It was space sounds, spaceships, everything. So,
now, were you in France at that time?
no, actually. When I grew up in France and in Canada. I would go for a few years to live with my mom and then go back to live with my father in France, back and forth. So when I first heard this Jar record, which I think it was Oxygen, I was on my way to go see Star Wars for the premiere, and I was living in Edmonton at the time, and that's kind of what happened. I'm waiting to see Star Wars. I'm a kid. This is the most extraordinary movie that's ever come out at the time. And I hear all this weird music, and I'm like, what is this? This is incredible. What's going on? And after that, I had to figure it out, and I just went from there. And then when I went back to France, that's when I bought an 808. I worked 2 years, actually, like any other kid, doing landscaping and stuff, to be able to afford to buy this drum machine. And then I figured out that it was just a drum machine. It didn't make any other sounds. So then I had to save again to get a synthesizer to actually make some sounds with it. And I went off with that and started making electronic music. And then strangely enough, in the early 80s, which is when I started making electronic music, DJing started to take off. And I got into DJing right away. I was like, wow. It was, I started hearing early techno and break records and electro. It was called electro at the time, but different kind of electro than today. And that right away took me to the next level. I was like, oh my God, what is this? I already had an 808, so I was there. I was like, oh my God, I can do this. So I started making music that way, right? I started making dance music before anything else, really. And I haven't stopped since.
Now, it would seem to me, and I could be wrong, but that you have found that way to successfully support yourself purely through music at this point.
Absolutely. I think that has to do with the fact that I started DJing in the top 40 world as a job before anything else. It's going to sound like a hipster thing, but when I started DJing, it wasn't cool at all. People would go up to you and you'd say, well, I'm a DJ. Oh, really? What's your real job? It was just a thing you did when you worked in a restaurant. In fact, when I started DJing, I was working as a busboy in a restaurant and helping the DJ. There was a small dance floor to the side of the restaurant, helping him out while he was DJing, and he kind of taught me how it went, and I went off with that and started playing rock and roll records and top 40 records, and would slide in an electronic record when I could. So it was a job from the very beginning. And then it turned into, as DJing evolved, and it turned more into kind of a performance thing. I naturally fell into that, but that's why I've been able to support myself my whole life, is because it's always been an employment for me. I've always worked in nightclubs. I love nightclubs. I've always been a nightclub guy. So that's kind of how it happened, and everything else kind of has always been around it. I've always been a DJ first, and an artist and a musician second.
And now, which is also, it's always been DJ Lace. That was always sort of like, what was on the flyers and how I knew it. So, but, I did always know, like, even, as I go down SoundCloud and I see, all the stuff that you produced, or on iTunes, it's still under DJ Lace.
Yeah, absolutely, because I don't want to confuse anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I already confuse people because I like both, esoteric and underground music, and I like pop music. And some people have a difficult time wrapping their head around the fact that I can go so wide in music. I can listen to something really silly and cheesy and poppy, and then go listen to something really dark and deep, and enjoy them both the same way. So I felt that if I was to, I should just be honest and just pick one name and just put it all under that hat and say, you figure out what you like. You go on my SoundCloud now, and you just, if you don't like this, don't go there. Then go to this playlist and listen to that stuff. But if you like this stuff, and so it's a little easier that way, rather than trying to have a million personas for every genre you like.
Well, I can relate to that from the DJ side, because the show Transcendence has always kind of had like trance at the core, but we've branched out. We do breakbeat stuff. We do a variety of different trance. Some of it's like pretty mellow. Some of it's melodic. Some of it is the harder edge stuff, psychedelic stuff. And so as stuff comes up on the SoundCloud profile, it's pretty diverse. And And I know some artists try real hard to cultivate, a name that sort of has a specific sound to it. And so for me, I like it when it's less about sort of the marketing of creating that sound and more about this is who I am and what I like. And, it's a variety and a bunch of different stuff.
I agree. I respect all aspects. Some people just want to do one thing and put it under one name, and I completely respect that. I'm incapable of doing that. If you go on my SoundCloud page, there's maybe 2 or 3 songs that kind of sound similar, but everything else is all over the place. And I kind of was taught that by my dad, because he's like that as a painter. He would never try and paint the same thing twice. He's like, why would you want to do that? So when I try and write music, which is difficult actually, it makes it difficult as a DJ, because if you write one song that everybody loves, they want you to make another one like that.
Yeah.
If you write a trance track or something that has this crazy drums, they want to hear those drums again in another song. And I'm like, well, no, I did that in that one. I'd like to try and do something else. And that kind of makes it difficult, because people are like, oh, no, really? No, do that again. Do this thing again. I'm like, I can't. I could, but yeah. You kind of, so it's one of those things where I think for me, variety works better. As a DJ, I'm consistent. Like, for example, I've been working at Basement for about 15 years now, and I've crafted a sound for Saturdays based around Eurodance, which I really like as a pop sound, like a European pop sound. And I'm very consistent with that. If you come every Saturday, it'll be consistent. You're not going to come on one Saturday and hear one thing and come on the next Saturday and be completely somewhere else. But as an artist, I give myself the opportunity to kind of go all over the place,
Now, 15 years at a club night, that's a long run for a club night.
Yeah. Well,
has it been under the same sort of name that long, or has it changed up in that time?
My sound's been very, like I said, as a DJ, I'm consistent. Because I really like Eurodance as a DJ. To me, it's a mixture of pop and electronic, and it kind of goes all over the way. But it stays mainstream enough for me that it makes me happy. I don't like to get too dark or deep when I'm doing a club night. I like to make it fun and happy, because I think that's what I do as a DJ. As a DJ, I'm like I said, it's more of a job for me. So I look at my responsibility is to entertain people more than it is to try and express myself as a DJ. I still do. There's a give and take where you'll play a song that you like and you play a song for them, a song for yourself. But I'm mostly there for the audience as a DJ. So I, growing up in Europe, I listened to a lot of Eurodance and Eurobeat when I was a kid. So that crafted my sound. And I found that in Canada here, it ended up being a good thing for me, because it's not a sound that everybody plays here. I've managed to craft an identity for myself as a pop DJ, which gives me a sound that not everybody else plays. So in that sense, it becomes unique, yet it's still consistent. And it works well after hours, because it's really high energy. On average, I stay between 138 to 140 BPMs all night. So it's a high energy sound. It works really well after hours. And it's a lot of fun. I like to keep it fun when I'm spinning. As an artist, like I said, it goes everywhere. Sometimes I'm really dark and moody and and sometimes I'm just happy and silly. But as a DJ, I'm consistently an uplifting guy. I sense that my responsibility is that I have these people who they spend all week working and dealing with life and all these troubles. So when they come in on the weekend, they want to have a good time and they want to be happy and they want to forget where they are for a few hours. And it's my responsibility to make that happen. So I've picked a sound that allows me to do that and go there for my crowd.
Yeah, it's
It's the best way I can explain it.
Absolutely. Well, and so if people want to find out about the Basement, where can they go to find out about it?
We're on Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook, obviously. So it's Club 816 /Basement. The official name is Club 816, and Basement is the name that the crowd's given us. So we've adopted that, because we are in a basement. And it's pretty easy to find. I think the majority of people who like I said, who like Hands Up, which is the sound that it's called now. It's called Hands Up Sound. Actually know where Basement is. It's on Granville. There's only 2 after hours in Vancouver. which is a shame.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I'm an industry professional, so the more the merrier. The more clubs there are, the happier I would be. But there's only two after hours, so there's Gorgamish, who plays a lot more housey and techno. And then there's us in 816 Basement, who play more like trance and hands up stuff. So that's what you've got to choose from when you're going after hours. Aside from, of course, all the the parties and things that happen all over the place, right? So if there were, the word is out there to the city. If you hear me, we need more after hours clubs. There's more music out there to be played.
Let's play a couple quick messages. I'm gonna change up the background music, and when we come back, let's chat a bit more about sort of how you approach some of your live stuff.
Sounds good.
This is Transcendence on CITR 101.9 FM, Vancouver. We're talking with DJ Lace. Stay tuned.
Sequential Circus has been Vancouver's premier showcase of live electronic music, art, and performance for over a decade. Strap on your dancing shoes and join us for Sequential Circus 22 on Saturday, April 21st at Open Studios. Musical performances by 1800 Height Street, Amos Hertzman, Lace, MAAM, and Quest, visuals by Dermot Glennon, Pixel Pusher, and Ian Ross, an aerial hoop performance by Celine. Tickets are $20. Get more information at sequentialcircus.ca.
For he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost jewels. and I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brother. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
All right, so do you recognize where this is from at all? You recognize the track, but
Absolutely.
do you recognize the mix?
I don't recognize the mix. I recognize the track because, like I told you, Little T is the one who turned me on to this song. She played it before I heard anybody because we used to have this competition of, trying to play tracks on each other and freaking each other out. And she played this and I lost it. And I was like, what is this? What is this mix from?
This is you from Life Force, 1995, New Year's Eve, which I believe was at an ice rink by BCIT, maybe?
Oh, I remember that. Ooh-wee. I'll always remember ice rinks. You know what? I think that might be the one where James played for the first time. So around that time, James Brown played his first gig. And I think it was around in an ice rink somewhere. That sounds familiar.
Well, at that time, I was, I'd been to a couple shows before that, but I didn't really know what was going on, right? Like somebody brought me to a show. I went to a couple others, but that was sort of like for me one of the beginning of my, long history with raves and underground parties and stuff like that, and likewise anything that was in an ice rink that stands out for me as well. There's like a handful of those. I've been to a few in Victoria, but not very many in Vancouver that I can recall.
Like I said, I'm pretty sure I remember that one, and that was the first one. Like I said, I think that was the first one James played at. He had played in clubs before, but I think that was the first gig he played. I remember because, like I said, yeah, ice rink. The only other ice rink I played was in Penticton for a show down there. I can't remember what the gig was, but that was the only time. Ice rinks, yeah, you're right. They're a really strange place, and the fun. The stranger the place, the better.
They had at least one or two ice rink shows here at UBC before the university shut that down, and one of them was Carl Cox with Skylab 2000 playing live.
Oh, I remember those guys.
Which was another highlight.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So upcoming is Sequential Circus 22, and so that's happening this Saturday at Open Studios, and it's unique in the sense that instead of people DJing, all of the acts that come there to perform are all live. And so you're one of those acts. You'll be playing there live this Saturday. There's DJing, which has its own need for mastery. There's production, which is pretty different when you're trying to produce a track, and then there's playing live. How is playing live different than DJing and production?
Well, it's live electronic or live PA. So the word live might confuse some, and you have to be very careful how you use that word, because some people might argue that it's not live. People who will play, for example, acoustic or electromechanical instruments might go, well, you're playing sequencers and things, so it's not technically live. But it is, because the machines are actually all playing live, and that's kind of the idea. I mean, the idea behind electronic dance music is that you make it with machines. That's the point. But you can also take those machines, like when you're in the studio, you'll write a song and you'll sequence a song out, and you'll have a drum machine, you'll have a sequencer, you'll have a synthesizer, you'll have an arpeggiator, and you get all these kind of machines. You write different parts on each of these machines, and you push a start button, and you get all these machines to kind of play in synchronicity, and then you try and record that. There's different ways to do that. Now with laptops, you could do it all in a laptop. It's a different application of the same idea. But the idea is that you have these machines, which are, to me, are kind of like little musical robots. I mean, because they're, you're programming functions into them, and then you're asking them to do these functions in real time and to communicate with each other over a network we call MIDI, and basically synchronize each other. And that's the idea behind live electronic. Live electronic or live PA, the idea is that you're going up there with these machines, and you're not playing one track into the next where you're yourself or, the synchronizer in between. At this point, you become more of a live performance engineer. You have, you start these machines, and you basically, in the case of Sequential Circus, you're playing for an hour, so you have to come up with an hour of ideas. I mean, the machines don't come up with the ideas. They can. I mean, you can auto-generate some small arpeggiator and melodic ideas, but you still have to put it together and go, okay, well, this song's going to have this and this and that and this and that and this, and when this happens, I want this to happen, and then so forth. And then you walk in the middle of that, and you choose what you want to do. Okay, when this machine is playing this sound, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to automate that, and then this is going to happen over here, and then I'm going to turn over here, and I'm going to play with this machine. And you perform on these machines while they're playing. So instead of, for example, having two turntables or having two CD players or having a controller with two things, you have anywhere from 2 to 3 to 10 machines in front of you, and they're all doing something in real time. Anything could go wrong at any time, and usually does. I mean, it's with live PA, it's very common, while you're playing, the audience doesn't know what's going on, but all hell is breaking loose in your set. Everybody thinks it sounds great, and you're pulling your hair out going, oh my God, what's going on? Everything's on fire. So that's kind of what's happening. The idea behind live PA is to give people your performance. You create this large playback set of machines, and then you go in there as a conductor and as a performer, and you can play on top. I mean, if you're a phenomenal keyboardist, for example, you can on top of that play solos, play chords, play all sorts of things, but you decide what you want to do. You could play the machines and play sounds, or you can modulate the sounds while they're playing, or you can trigger sounds while they're playing, and you kind of become one of the machines yourself. You integrate yourself with what's going on. So there's a symbiosis between yourself as a human being performing and these machines playing back all this stuff that you pre-programmed in real time. It's really exciting. It's exciting for the audience, because when it's done well, it feels just as great sounding as a perfect record. It sounds great when it's done well, and you as a performer, you get a chance to interact with your set a little bit more than DJing. And DJing is great. I mean, don't trust me, I love DJing. So I would never put it down. But it's very different. When you're the DJ, you're synchronizing, you're choosing tracks, based on emotions, and you're dealing with people's emotions, and you're reacting to that, and you're choosing the tracks that you're going to play. And your job is to try and make it from track A to track B in as much of a seamless and somewhat theatrical way as possible. You want to create anticipation, you want to create these effects. So there's an aspect there of live performance. When you're up there with your machines, it's a little different, because you don't have that choice anymore. You may have the ability to play different patterns, different songs, but you come up with only a limited palette of sounds, a limited number of sequences, and you made them all. So it's a little bit different, because you made everything, and everything still has to, it still has to sound good. It still has to be compelling to a certain degree. So it becomes really exciting as a performer in that sense. It's just like, it's actually more restrictive than being in a regular, for example, rock or electro or acoustic band, because when you're playing an instrument like a guitar or drum, whatever, you can go anywhere. You can really, you can say, hey, all of a sudden I'm going to play this now. When you're dealing with electronic machines, you don't always have that ability. There's only so many things you can do. And if you decide all of a sudden you want to go completely somewhere else and you don't have that in the machines, you can't go there. So there's a little bit of preparation involved. There's a little bit of there's certain restrictions that make the performance that much more exciting for you.
So in your live PA set, at least like next week, how much of that will be sort of pre-planned and ahead of time, and how much of it will be improvised and sort of, whatever you feel like at the time?
My live electronic sets have evolved into something completely different. I started out just playing with like I said, I would have a drum machine and I would have some synths and some sequences, and I just did that, and I would just play sequences and play on top and play just sounds. And then around the late 90s, I was always a visual artist at the same time because of my background and my family. And video started to become interesting because computers started to get fast enough to be able to control video. And I saw a couple bands. I mean, we can start there. I saw a couple bands that I really liked. One of them was Emergency Broadcast Network, and the other one was Cold Cut. And what those two bands did, Emergency Broadcast Network did it first. They did it before anybody. And basically, they took old Mac Quadra computers, if anybody remembers what those are, and created a program called AVS on there, which allowed them from a MIDI keyboard to trigger videos. So you would have these little video clips, and then they would press a note on a MIDI keyboard and actually would play the video. Today, most VJs will go, yeah, whatever, we can all do that. But in the late 80s, early 90s, nobody did that. In fact, they got really famous because they did it for U2 before anybody else. U2 had a tour where they sampled Bush saying, "We will rock you." I don't know, that's another one to remember. And that was Emergency Broadcast Network that did that for them, and that was all live. People thought it was just a VHS tape or something playing back, but they were actually playing that live. They were triggering those VJ loops, which what we call them now, live at the time. So I got into that in the late 90s before anybody else, and I had a good friend of mine who worked at a video games company. I forgot the name of the company at the time, but he was one of the head programmers there. And I showed him what was going on there, and I said, wouldn't it be neat if we could have a sampler, if some kind of device that worked just like I had a K2000 sampler that worked just like this sampler, where I could sample video and then play it back and then sequence that video back, so that I could actually get these talking heads to become like singers in my shows, or get them to say stuff while I was playing music and create some kind of multimedia performance. And he said, oh yeah, I could do that. So software programmers, I've learned to understand, they always say that. You come up with, wouldn't it be great if we could build this sort of virtual 747 and it could fly to space? And they'll sit there and go, yeah, I could do that. Which is what happened. So, it took him a week actually, and he came back and he showed me this program called MIDIVid. And it did exactly what I wanted. It allowed me to do that. And then I got into that. I got into more multimedia performance. And things evolved into my live shows being more like small multimedia movies. And that's kind of what I do now. I've kind of evolved into that. Now when I write music for the internet or for playback, I'll just play, I just write songs with sounds. But when I write live shows, I'm finally able now to do what I saw when I was a kid, which is multimedia sound to light performances. So I watch videos online, I see stuff. I've been going on a place called archive.org, which is a great resource of old government films. And I really like those films, actually. I really like old government films, and especially a lot of the old U.S. educational films, because they're really crazy, actually. You really have to see some of these films in context to understand you really understand how crazy America is now when you watch the films that they watched when they were in school. You know? So, and that stuff is great stuff to derive, you know, satire and interesting things from, and clips of people saying ridiculous things, right, to make it more exciting. And that's what I like to do. When I do live electronic now, I like to write music, and I like to sample video that has the audio incorporated into it, like talking heads and people saying stuff, and try to combine that into multimedia songs. So the video aspect of it ends up being stuff that I pre-program. So I have, you know, I write songs ahead of time, and I lay that out into like a 1 hour long performance. You know, I compose this giant 1 hour long movie where all the videos kind of, you know, it all goes in line. I can loop it at any point and stay somewhere if I want. And then once I have that kind of where I want, on top of that, I bring in live performance electronic instruments like my 303. I'll program some patterns into that, and I have a couple other items like that, or more like groove boxes, which you can, you know, you basically sequence those things and play them, and you can modulate them while they're playing. And that's kind of what I like doing. I like to modulate sounds. This is the engineer side of me. I like to mix the track. I like to modulate the tracks while the stuff is playing, and then loop aspects of it when I'm going to stay somewhere for a while and mess around with that. But the video is something that I write ahead of time, because it's anybody will tell you, especially VJs will tell you, that it's really hard to just do that on the fly. You know, come up with sounds on the fly is one thing, but come up with like video on the fly is a whole other world. It's really something that you need to prepare, especially when you're getting, like I said, I for example, one of the tracks that I'm working on right now, one of the tracks in the show that people will see is a track about fashion. So I found a U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation film from the 90s about camouflage in rural settings, so you can survey criminals. So this guy is talking about the best way to camouflage yourself and how to organize your clothing for camouflaging and disappearing in your environment. And so I'm cutting him up in little pieces, and I'm going to interlay that with images of downtown fashion and interesting people just wearing crazy fashions and stuff like that, and kind of to make some kind of satire about, you know, fitting into your environment, which is something that everybody is always worried about. So that's kind of one of the things that happens. So when I play live, you can dance to the stuff. If you're not interested, you can sit by the bar and watch the video. You know, it's like it's a multimedia performance. So that's kind of what I like to do now.
And in the way that you say that, like, there's some satire, like, it also has an artistic component where you're putting together, like, you're saying something artistically.
Absolutely. None of it is gratuitous. I mean, it all comes out of my head. So I'm very honest about the things that I put in video. I don't just put stuff up there just because I think it's funny. It has to appeal to me, and there's always something there. You know, as whether it looks deep or whether it looks superficial, like I said, it comes out of my head, and it's something that I'm thinking about. And when I'm watching, especially when I'm watching these films, that's what I watch these things and I feel things, and I'm like, oh my God, that makes me think about that. Okay, I'm gonna go there, you know. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It's like anything else, really, right? But it is that way. It's me in there somewhere. You know what I mean? When you're watching and you're coming to see a show like that, you're basically stepping into my head, you know, and hanging out with me for an hour, thinking all the crazy things that I'm thinking, right?
Which is awesome. I love, you know, I mean, like I think that there's an aspect of somebody that could, you know, whether they go to DJ or if they're going to perform, that it's all just about the perform. You know, it's like, getting paid to have a performance and make people enjoy it and buy a ticket. And it doesn't necessarily have to have like that personal, artistic, a piece of yourself aspect to it. And so the way that you describe it in being able to craft all of those different components together in that artistic way is very cool.
I think that due to the nature of the material, if I was to do it any other way, it would come out. I don't think you can because it's so out there and it's so different. Like I said, it's basically an audio visual song. I write the video and the music at the same time, you know, and trying to make it all fit together. And it's not always satire. Some of it is like, you know, some of it I'll find. There's another song that I won't tell you what it is. I'll just play it. But there's sometimes I'll find old singers, and I will really like what they sang, and I'll just do a live video remix of that and try to reincorporate that singer, what they were singing, into a completely new song. So it's you know, like I said, if you don't, because of the nature of the material, I think that if I was to fake it anyway and just be gratuitous about it, I think I would be able to tell, and I think anybody else would be able to tell. Video is so, I mean, audio is ephemeral, and you can kind of, it's hard to tell sometimes whether the intent is. But with video, the intent is there. You're looking at it. You're using your eyes. You can't go anywhere else. You know what I mean? So it's really, you have to be honest. And it's basically when I'm doing video stuff, if people ask me about it after, and I said, yeah, that's what I was thinking when I did that. And, you know, there you go. You know, this is for better or for worse.
Before we take another break, and then maybe we'll get you set up to play for a bit. Sure. But I know that in the way that you incorporate the different media, that I think another potential theme that you have incorporated in the past is lasers. Because I've seen, if I follow you on Facebook, there's like, you know, I mean, you're always tinkering with something, but like every fourth or fifth project seems to be like fixing a laser, building a 360 laser. I remember a listening room show at the planetarium, which I believe that you played at, to a laser show.
I love lasers. Who doesn't love lasers? I don't know anybody. Hey, do you like lasers? Yeah, man, I love lasers.
But for most of us, that's where it stops, right? It's like, do you love lasers? Yeah, I love lasers. But for you, that has become, like, you have become pretty intimate with the lasers.
I have, yeah.
Did you finish that 360 laser?
Yeah, I did. And I didn't like what it did. You know, that's, anybody who tinkers with electronics will tell you that 90% of the stuff they build, they tear apart again. And the 10% ends up being what you're keeping. I'm really hoping that I can have these two lasers that I'm working on ready for this show. I ordered parts from China, and they're taking forever to get here. I have a controller coming from Czechoslovakia, which is not here either. Because unfortunately, with lasers, nobody builds anything here.
Right.
You know, all the stuff you need is somewhere else in the world, so you're at the mercy of shipping, right? So right now I'm freaking out because there's a week left, and you know, I've got 90% of this thing sitting on a table, and I don't know if it's going to be ready in time. It's not a huge deal because it's really about the sound and the video. That's my show. The laser is kind of a bonus. If I can get that going, I'll be a happy guy. But you're right. I'm a fanatic for laser shows. It's just something I really like. I know at the club, there's lasers everywhere. You know, I built half of them, and they're kind of firing all over the place in the club. And you know,
there was a show that I remember at the Riverside Banquet Hall, and I believe it was Chris Liberator had come to headline it. And they had set up a full spectrum laser with multiple mirror points around the room, and they had rainbow lasers running all over the place. They're just a huge it was bouncing everywhere. So like the setup and the attention that they had taken to you know, create the different patterns with all the mirrors was really quite something.
I think it's one of those technologies that we've taken everything else for granted. Like I said, the video stuff that I do now, everybody's VJing. So I mean, it's you know, it's for granted. But lasers are still this sort of sci-fi thing. I think it still feels futuristic. You know, it just has that great feel. You know, it depends on the medium, of course. It has to fit, you know, with the show. But it just, I don't know. I go see a laser show and I feel like I'm 12. I'm like, wee, lasers, pew pew.
All right, let's play a couple more messages, and then let's come back, get you set up, play some music.
We'll do.
And of course, if you haven't got tickets yet, Sequential Circus 22. There's a link up on the Transcendence Facebook page, which is facebook.com/DJ Smiley Mike, and you can find out more at sequentialcircus.ca. And with that, you're listening to CITR 101.9 FM Vancouver.